Well, hello there. Greetings, everyone. I'm Lorenzo. This is my comic son, Marcus, and we're here for this special interview of Shobo Coker, who is waiting in the wings here. Just wanted to get everything going here. So got the Perry Gaming. What's up, Perry?
Shout out to the homie Perry. We got Phil's Treehouse in the house. What up, Phil? We appreciate you coming through. You got me off my game. I'm used to an intro. I was gonna eat a snack real quick. I thought I had time still, and then you whammoed me. I wasn't ready for this. Okay, I'm ready now though.
We're going a different intro, but for now we're just gonna just go cold open, so to speak. All right, so I'll talk a little bit about Shobo first before we bring him on. And I can share the screen here for a second. Oh, no, not to share the screen. Okay. Well, basically, Shobo is a writer and a narrative designer born in Lagos, Nigeria, and is currently based in Prague in the Czech Republic. His work includes creator-owned comics such as Outcast of Jupiter, which is a Kickstarter, New Masters, the Image Comics joint, Buckhead from Boom Studios, and Hot Ground from Heavy Metal Magazine. In addition to comics, Shobo's worked as a narrative designer on the Lamplighter League for Paradox and Interactive, and helped establish the indie game studio Endless Adventures Inc. in the Philippines. With a passion for cultural authenticity and storytelling, he focuses on developing African-centered worlds, characters, and narratives that resonate deeply with audiences. In this latest adventure here with his brother Shof, he's done Bronze Faces, which is what we're here to talk about mostly today. But I want to mention some of the other works too, especially New Masters, which I really love that a lot. So without further ado, let's bring the man himself on. Here's Mr. Shobo Coker. Greetings, Shobo.
Hey, Lorenzo. Hey, Marcus. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it. I know it's pretty early for everyone.
Just for me.
Okay. Not early for me, brother.
Okay. What time is it? What time is it there?
It's 11 a.m. here.
11 a.m. here.
It's still a little early for me.
Yeah, for me, it's 9 o'clock a.m. here for me. I'm used to like being a retired senior and all that. I'm never up before noon, so it's just
living that good life.
Yeah, you know how that is. We paid our dues, to get there. So you're in what did I ask? You're in Prague in the Czech Republic. That's correct. Is that
yeah.
You were born obviously in Lagos in Nigeria. What drew you to Prague?
I was born in Lagos. I grew up there. I lived there for first 20 years of my life, and this last 20, it's been pretty much all over. I'm 43 now, so pretty much post college, I was back home in Nigeria. I moved to the Philippines, fell in love, got married, back to the States, and moved to Manila again, and most recently, my wife got a job opportunity here, and so because I've been able to work from home for pretty much my entire career, I was like, all right, let's go to Prague. Let's see what the Czech Republic is like. It felt like a once in a lifetime opportunity, right? New culture, new people, new language. Why not?
Yeah, I knew a guy when I lived in Chicago. He married a woman from the Czech Republic, and they moved there. He was just like, he loved it. So I was just
it's
curious.
It's a beautiful, beautiful place. It's one of those old cities where you walk out and it's like you're on a movie set or something. There's rolling hills, there's greenery, there's buildings that are hundreds of years old, and everything's got a story. So in that sense, it's really cool. I couldn't have asked for a more fun adventure at this stage in my life, because I kind of thought maybe I was done learning languages, maybe I was done with the whole like moving around thing, and then life threw this at me, and I was like, yep, I'm gonna catch that ball and run with it. It's been great.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay, let's talk about the main reason we're here. This is just Bronze Faces. I've had a chance to read it. Number one, I think number two is coming out next week, I think, or
March 12th. Thank you for putting me on the spot. I was like,
Oh,
when's
no
my
problem.
comic come out again? Yeah, March 12th, I think it is.
Yeah, I thought we maybe didn't preview it in our preview this week, but there's probably the next new comic book day, or actually in two, because it's the 26th will be the next comic book day. But that give people a chance to pick up the number one, which is out now in comic book shops. I noticed it's there's a dynamic between the main characters that was kind of interesting. There are three friends. The boy is Timmy. The young man, I should say, is Timmy, the son of the artist, and his other two friends are they're not related. Is that correct?
No, not by blood. I listen. I put that line in there intentionally. Say there's a line where just after Timmy's father dies and this lawyer's talking to him, and he's like, "Do you have any siblings?" And he says, "No, not by blood." Just to make sure that look, these people are not related by blood, because there's some hanky panky that goes on, and
Yes.
It's one of those things where they grew up in the same household, and so they're really, really close. They know each other, and there's a complex dynamic and complex relationships, but they are not related by blood.
Mm-hmm. Because it seems that Timmy is a little bit closer, so to speak, to Sango, I believe is her name. Shango,
yeah.
excuse me,
Sure.
and Ruth. I guess her nickname is Ruth.
Her family name is Ruth, or her real name is Ruth. Her nickname is actually Bonka. Which is
Bonka. Okay.
And that's correct. That's I wouldn't say that Timmy is necessarily closest to Shango. I would say let's see how the story pans out. Let's see how the backstories emerge, and see where the story goes. Before we say who's like really close to each other. But that first issue for sure, Shango is kind of a force of nature, and look, if she wants something, she's gonna get it. And in that first issue, she got Timmy, that's for sure. Yeah.
You see that in the first issue, definitely, that she gets what she wants. You even see it in their childhood too, I guess. Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Just bossing people around, telling them to wash my clothes now, like
And that's something that I actually really appreciate, that you guys picked up Bronze Faces and spotlighted it, and because I think that one thing that single issues are, when people pick up a single issue, sometimes, and this is a single issue that is part of a 6-issue run. When people pick up a single issue, they sometimes feel like they're gonna just sort of blaze through it and read it once, and that's it. And when I write stories, I tend to write them so that maybe you need to go a little bit slower, and you need to maybe read it twice, just to really kind of absorb everything that's on the page, because and I really want to put in the legwork so that you identify with the characters, or at least you feel for the characters, and that's really hard to do with an indie comic, especially. I think there is a lot of pressure to just kind of like move really quickly and get to the action, because that is seen as a quote unquote good stuff. But for me, you have to have those emotional stakes, and building those emotional stakes in the first issue. I really appreciate, like I said, that you guys picked it up and you took the time to go through it. Appreciate the product placement too, Mark. It's like Bronze Faces #1. I appreciate it right there. Thanks.
Got you, homie. No, and you mentioned about emotional stakes and building it, and having just come out of Captain America 4, I'm keenly aware of the need to build the stakes. And you definitely get that in this book, and I get that. And also I can never judge a book by just one issue myself for the reasons that you're talking about. That's why I'm more of a trade. I collect floppies, but I really should read and trade. That's how I like to read, because you can't really get what the author is trying to do and without giving him a chance to do it. So I hear you on that 1,000%. I think you did. I wasn't going to pick this book up. I'll just say that. But then we were going to interview us. So I was like, all right, let me pick it up and read it. And I did read it. And I was like, okay, all right. This book is taking some time. Like you said, you've got to think about it. You got to work through the relationships that are building, which I appreciated that. And so I was like, okay, I think I am going to pull this series now. And then I watched the Pink Riot interview that you guys did on YouTube, and just talking about the team and how you guys came together to do it, and the real story of the political story, if you will, of the book. I think all that's super fascinating. So I've just been progressively more and more interested in it. So it's good that you're doing this interview, because talking about this book, I think, can really get more people into the book and what you guys are doing.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I hope so. And on the political side of things, that is something that really kind of hit me when I was doing research for the book, because, and I mentioned this briefly in the Pink Riot interview, but there's this key piece of art from the Benin bronzes. It's called the Queen Idia mask. And growing up in Nigeria, we always had this huge, gigantic, like 1 or 2 foot tall wooden mask on the wall, and I saw it every day. It was something I just kind of grew up with, and I thought, oh, that's what the mask looks like. I always loved it, and I didn't realize until decades later that thing, in the real thing, is just it's about this small. It's this small, and it hit me that I'd never seen it in context. And you go to museums, and I'm not a fan of museums, because when you go to a museum and you see an artist's work, especially an indigenous artist's work, it is so often out of context. It's in these white walls. There's this oppressive space all around it. It doesn't really mean anything. You don't get anything of the actual artist, and that's why one of the reasons why we made an effort to really show Timmy's dad's workshop, to show the space that he works in, and you look around and you get a sense of all of the history that this person has created, right? And then you go to how it is displayed in the British Museum, and it's just, plaques on a wall and white empty space around it, because it's been removed from, like, the story is severed. It's cut from its original context, and it is now mostly enjoyed as an object. It is no longer what it was originally supposed to be. It's supposed to be part of the story. And the Benin bronzes, that's what they did. They were plaques that chronicled the history of Benin. When you look at them, you can see, oh, this is when the Portuguese arrived. These are the horses that they brought with them. You can see they brought guns. You can see this was a period of strife in the kingdom, and there were columns, and you go into the palace, and you can actually see the history of Benin. But when they're taken out of that context and they are put up in this white space, they're robbed of all of that history, of that meaning, and that weight. And the people who it meant so much to, they don't get a chance to see them anymore. I read stories of really high-ranking Benin officials who would go to the British Museum, and the impression that I get is that they are lessened because they're having to ask to see something that is such an important part of their history, right? And these people have great power where they come from, but then in this space, they're asking if they can have access to that, and it's just such a weird, bizarre thing. So that was one of the primary drivers behind the desire to this. I was just like, what if we took it back? That Killmonger movement. What if we just took it back? And what if that power fantasy was real? Yeah.
That was a great moment in that movie Black Panther, where Killmonger is in the museum talking about how these artifacts got there. That was powerful stuff. I was thinking about, like, your obvious solution. Well, if we can't get this back by being reasonable, by making reasoned arguments as to why this should be where we're saying it should be, let's just take it. And that's an obvious, like, right? Like, if I can't reason with you, I'm just going to take it from you if I can.
Yeah, and it is a power fantasy because, or it is I think the reason why hopefully Bronze Faces an interesting an interesting book because it about a real political thing, but it is also a fun book because it is a fantasy. That can never really happen, unlikely to really,
Right.
but
Yeah.
what if, right? What if? And then Shof came along and he had this idea of layering some of that with specific Yoruba mythology, the story of Shango, Timi, and Bonka. And in that story, that myth, Shango is one of the most powerful and most revered Orisha in the Yoruba kingdom. He's the god of lightning and thunder, but at this time he's just a really really powerful and renowned king, and he has these two best friends, and he's conquering lands. But the people in the kingdom, they're starting to really love Timian Bonka more than Shango. And so he gets a little bit jealous and he sends them out hoping that, go and do this really dangerous thing here and this really, maybe they'll get killed and their legend will die with them. And they end up they end up succeeding and coming back. And Shango he gets even more bitter. And I don't want to spoil the myth. I will say that our story doesn't reflect it 100%, but we're definitely looking at the myth and saying, how can we make this story, this realistic story between three friends, have echoes of myth and make it seem like a larger, when you watch an American or European heist, like Ocean's 11 or Mission Impossible, there is an almost superheroic aspect to it. And I think what we wanted to do was figure out how we could do something similar with Shango, Timi, and Bonka. And the iconography of the masks, the reflection of the Yoruba myths, that's what we're trying to do. Is kind of give you something that feels a little bit fresh and new, but in that, like, everybody loves a good heist, right? And hopefully that's what we've crafted.
Absolutely.
And I love the dynamic that you set up where everything's not, apples and apple pies out here. There's these issues between our characters that we can already see in the first issue that they're definitely going to cause problems down the road, especially given what they're trying to do. So there's a lot going on in that first issue, as you say, man. Definitely.
Yeah. And that's kind of the way it is with groups that are in a minority, is that we all have common experiences. We're all struggling for the same thing, and yet it's just personal issues seem to get in the way. We can't once you have more than one person, there's some kind of like power dynamic. There are conflicts that appear. There are issues with how a problem should be solved. One person wants to use force, another person wants to use diplomacy, and we're like, okay, let's lean into that. Let's make these three people archetypes as well for maybe like different ideologies. And over the course of the comic, that is going to come to the forefront, and you are going to feel repercussions. You're going to see relationships fracture. You're going to see them come back together. You're going to see them get strained. Yeah, that's just what we wanted to do. We wanted conflict because despite having the same goal, it's never as easy as like, let's all do this and it's all good. There's always going to be conflict, and you have to kind of figure out how to get past that. That was another thing that we wanted to do, is explore how to get past that.
Your artist, Alex, right? Alexander.
Mm-hmm.
I was watching again the Pink Riot interview. I was watching that, and he had mentioned how he was kind of mixed race, and how that really played into this book for him. And him always feeling like he's in the middle of arguments, and that is. I'm also a mixed race, and I could not have related to that more. And I like the setup of between the characters of one Shango leaving, and then it's Timmy that stayed there, and this sort of argument that they're having about leaving and staying, and just those kind of arguments. And really, I can always understand both sides of the argument, so I'm always feeling in the middle of things. So I thought it was interesting, and I'm interested to see how you all continue to put that sort of natural. We're having an argument. How can we be reasonable? How can this thing work out? You know, and I'm interested to see it.
Yeah. Alex, honestly, I still kind of can't believe that we were able to rope Alex into working with us, because he is such a celebrated artist. He's won awards. His work
Eisner.
he's won an Eisner Award. I think he's also a Harvey Award winner. And so, being able to, the creative team that we put together, Jeff and I were like, okay, we have Eisner and Harvey Award winning artist Alexandra Tefenkji. We have, I believe, Eisner Award winning colorist Lee Luffridge, and also Eisner Award winning letterer Hassan Otsman Elhau. And then there's Shof and me. So you can, it's like we need to be right again. We need to make sure that we're doing right by these people, and that duality of feeling. It's something that, it's funny because my mother is half German, and so growing up in Nigeria, I considered mixed race, and so I felt that big time as well, like being light skinned in Nigeria. You get called ajabota, you get called soft, which basically is like ajabota means soft butter. You melt under the sun, kind of thing, like easy to, like you can't hold up to it. And so I felt that a lot in Nigeria, and the pressure to prove that you are Nigerian, right, through and through. And to compound that, I leave when I'm 20, which I never thought I was going to be able to leave Nigeria. Growing up in the 80s and 90s, Nigeria was in such a rough place economically. I was just like, well, I'm gonna stay in Nigeria. I'm going to figure out I am going to make my own image comics in Nigeria. That was my goal. Was that we're going to figure out how to make image comics. We're going to figure out how to make a Disney. We're going to build that in Nigeria within this difficult economic climate. And so I was very surprised when my dad came to me one day and said, "Hey, would you like to go to the US for college? We'll make it happen. We'll figure out a way to make it happen." And then leaving, and I look back now and I'm like, well, I know people who go back. I know people who've stayed, and there's that tug of guilt in you, and that conflicting thing of, yes, I am Nigerian, but how Nigerian am I? How Nigerian does a person whose parents left Nigeria to go to London, and they're born there and they're steeped in Nigerianness, or they live in Atlanta and they're steeped in Nigerianness because of their parents and everyone around them, but they weren't born in Nigeria, right? And even like the Black American experience, that tether that has been cut from the original source, and or the source of that original, like that original history. There's that that feeling of the conflict that's within all of us, and it was really important to me that Shango was the one who embodied that, because Shango is such a force of nature that she might potentially come off as unlikable if there is nothing about her character that you can look at and say, I totally get that. I feel that, and I understand where that hurt comes from now. And I think we're gonna continue exploring it throughout the series.
And we're looking at 6 issues, right, for this first arc?
6 issues, yeah. And it felt like I was talking to someone on the creative team at Boom a couple of days ago, and he mentioned that 6 issues feels like a 90-minute movie. And I was like, yeah, that's right, 90-minute movie. You get in, you get out, you tell the story that you want to tell. There's no fat on the bone. None of this like 2-hour and 30-minute, 3-hour movie stuff. I like a trade. Actually, that's how I like to consume comics as well. That's how I like to read comics. But even in a trade form, 6 issues is about between 120 to 150 pages, depending on what you do with back matter and all that stuff. And it feels about right for me. If touch wood, if it does really well, Shof and I do have ideas for where we could potentially take the story. But at the end of the story, at the end of issue 6, you as the reader should have come to a place where you feel really good about how the characters ended up, and we want it to feel like it doesn't end. I will say it right now, it doesn't end on a cliffhanger. It ends conclusively.
Okay.
I had to think about that. I was like, am I lying when I say this? Yeah, it ends conclusively.
So even if you don't continue, and I think I heard you say this, but even if you don't continue from 6, you will still have told a complete story.
Yeah, the complete
which you want to hear
story.
that.
Yeah, yes. You're not going to be left wondering, yeah. Well, let's just say we leave threads where you can extrapolate where these characters are going to, where I think you would still want to see more of them, but this particular story, this chapter has been told and it comes to a close.
Yeah. And so, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, but obviously the setup you have here, this sort of heist of a ton of artifacts from all over the world, you could run that on and on, for a good long time, I imagine. Is that something you guys have thought about, or do you guys have a shorter story in mind, or what were your thoughts on the bigger picture for it?
Yeah, when Shof and I were originally thinking about the concept for Bronze Faces, that was the original plan, was to end on a cliffhanger and was to set up the fact that, look, we as Africans, as Nigerians specifically, have had the opportunity to indulge in this fantasy. Let's now see what somebody who wants to go after the Koh-i-Noor diamond wants to do with it. Maybe somebody who wants to go after the hundreds of thousands of artifacts that were looted from Hong Kong by the British. Maybe someone wants to do that. That was the original plan, and it's still technically possible. It's still within the realm of that universe, but we figured, you know what? We don't want to do the thing where it's so obvious that we are setting up a franchise. We want you to pick this up and to enjoy it for what it is. And if it spawns a franchise, that's great. I used to really like that whole like Marvel post credits thing, where the first Iron Man, you get so excited about it, and you see certain characters show up, and I'm trying to remember who shows up at the end of that first Iron Man movie. Was it
Samuel Jackson, right?
It was yeah, right, yes. Yeah.
The Avengers Initiative.
The Avengers Initiative. And you're like, that felt great. But then after a while, you get enough of those that don't actually come to any kind of fruition, that just don't lead into anything. And they feel more like an obligation, or they feel as though they're taking the audience for granted. Like, I know that you're going to be back. And honestly, we're not that presumptuous. We're thinking, we appreciate the time that you spend reading this book, and we want to be respectful of that time. And so there are enough threads, like I said, to think about how this story could go off in some interesting places without having to end the way. And I will say the original ending. It feels weird saying this because we're only at issue 1, and this is not a spoiler because it doesn't happen any longer. But the original ending essentially had it ended on a map and somebody pointing to the Tower of London and talking about the Koh-i-Noor diamond, which is I believe it's the main jewel in the British crown, which
Crown jewels.
Yeah, the crown jewels, and it's a looted artifact. I hope I don't get this wrong. I believe it was looted from India, and the audacity of that, to me is mind-boggling. We ended up not doing that, so not a spoiler. It goes in a completely different direction now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would have been interesting though. Yeah, it's one way to go.
Yeah, and I still think that if Bronze Faces is successful, we don't want to monopolize that success. The only way that we get this message out in a true way is to, it might, maybe it sounds naive, but is to link hands and say, no, we as minorities are not going to stand for what happened. We want these artifacts back as one voice.
I think that is the bigger message in the story. I mean, there's the of course the dynamics between the main characters and the representation of the myth that you explained earlier, which is, I think, genius. But your message is that this I guess what you call it, appropriation of
I would call it theft. It's looting, essentially.
Theft. Yeah,
okay, that's too kind of a word.
they're not borrowing it; they took it.
They took it. Yeah.
Yes, good point. Yeah, so that is a great message, and I think that's the bigger message. It's interesting that because your brother Shof, am I pronouncing his name correctly?
Perfect. Yeah, actually, yes, Shof. Yeah.
I've totally butchered everyone else's name in the credits.
No, you did well, actually. Yeah, you did great.
But he's a very accomplished artist himself. As I saw in this New Masters, which is when your I just realized that, whoa, wow, I remember this team from that book, and that's an amazing series. I've only finished the first 3 issues of this, and I love it so much. This is a different kind of a concept. I just want to touch on it a little because it's just so amazing. You should go out and pick this up as well as Bronze Faces. A New Masters deals with colonizers from the stars. So just a different meet the new boss, same as the old boss kind of a thing, maybe. Or I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but just that's kind of what I felt from it. And and I just was wondering, maybe because we got such an amazing artist for this book, maybe Shof thought he has another project. You just take this series off or something. Am I close to being close to the reality on that?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, Shof is an incredible artist, and he is one of the deepest thinkers I have ever met when it comes to figuring out how to interpret Africanness and Nigerianness in the context of modern iconography. So whether it is science fiction or fantasy, how to interpret that. He's always thinking on that, and it's on such a deep level. But he would probably be the first to tell you that he's not a comic book artist, or he doesn't want to be a comic book artist, really. And so his passion lies in animation. So he worked as the director on an episode of a Disney Plus short called Kizazi. The short itself is called Moremi, and it was part of an anthology on Disney Plus called Kizazi Moto. And I would recommend check it out if you have Disney Plus, just to see some really cool stuff that's coming out of the continent. And that show's first love is animation. But New Masters is his promise to me that we would work on a comic book together. And this goes back to over something like 15, 20 years ago at this point, when we were both kind of in college. He's a few years younger than I am. And we just wanted to create a universe that addressed a lot of the things that we felt growing up, but also that celebrated a lot of the things that we feel and felt growing up as Nigerians. And so New Masters is, from the ground up, it is an African futurist universe from the ground up. And we wanted to do something, because Black Panther exists, and we wanted to do something that was distinct from that. We wanted to do something that was separate from Star Wars, but that could be a Star Wars for us, a cohesive universe that doesn't have superheroes, but is science fiction and is fun, interesting, engaging. It deals with the specter of colonialism. So in the book, the alien race that comes from the stars, they have generally been colonizers, and we didn't want it to feel like we were actively under the yoke of active colonizers, because there's a legacy of colonization. There's things that it does to people who have been colonized. Your language changes, the food that you eat changes, the way you speak, the your clothes, your traditions and customs and gods, all of that stuff, the way you think, just your thought patterns, the architecture changes. Your everything about your identity is forever changed. And we wanted to create a universe where we accept that that has happened. How do we move forward now? Like we can't, the promise of Wakanda is a fantasy in which an African continent was never colonized. And it is, what would an African continent be if it was the country, sorry, be if it was the absolute peak of what it could be? And this instead is a country that has been through the ringer, but still continues to persevere and find hope and enjoy. And how does it do that? It does that by relying on the strength of its people and the strength of the youth. And that's why New Masters focuses especially on a young Black girl coming up in this really kind of politically charged climate and finding her strength. And when she does, I don't want to spoil the story because you're still on issue 3, but that was the impetus behind it. We wanted to create this whole entire universe. And you don't have the trade paperback, so I don't know if this is included. I can't remember if this is included in the single issues, but the trade paperback has a ton of back matter where we talk about, the technology that we were thinking about, how we decided on certain things about the world, because we've thought about all of this stuff in such great detail. We just wanted to create something that felt like black people and Africans in the diaspora, it was theirs, and that they could adopt it, and they could read, and they could hear, they could see the characters speak pidgin and kind of parse it, and then maybe start using that in their daily lives. Something that felt like ours is what we wanted to do.
I saw the word chai a lot. But what look at that word? What does chai mean? You use that expression a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, chai is just like it's when you say chai, or it's just it's an expression of disbelief, or something weird, bizarre, amazing has happened, and you're expressing disbelief. And it's one of those really, like, Nigerian pidgin is such a sweet language, and when I say it's a sweet language, I mean speaking in pidgin is a joy. It feels like you can communicate, because when you speak in English, it's mostly kind of like formal communication, and there is an aspect of body language, but pidgin takes that, like, body language, and I think that's even in, like, when Black Americans speak, usually that body language is a part of that communication, right? And I think it's the same way in Africa and in Nigeria as well. Body language is such a huge part of it. It feels sweet. You enjoy communicating in that. So yeah, chai is just an expression of disbelief or wonder or excitement. It's a good word. It's useful. Yeah.
So we've got a hint of a few languages here. What's the total number of languages? It's sounding like it's absurd.
In Nigeria?
That you speak.
Oh, no, please. I speak one language, and that language is English. I speak Pidgin English of the 80s and 90s specifically, because I left after that. I keep wondering that myself. I'm like, if I, like, my Pidgin English is out of date, and the truth is that if you don't live in it, and if you aren't steeped in it, if you don't communicate in it every day, your vocabulary and vernacular is stuck in a certain era to a certain degree, right? So I speak Pidgin English of the 80s and 90s, and I do. There are some other, like, I speak a little bit of Czech now. I would not call myself I'm not fluent at all. So yeah, that's, I also can understand a decent amount of Yoruba, which is my tribe's language. So, yeah.
Cool.
Oh.
Yeah.
I have no idea what my tribe's language would be, so it's good that you know that. You have a very, it's maybe you don't notice it because you don't hear yourself, but you have an accent that it doesn't. I see what Marcus is saying. You can't quite place it, but it's it's English, but it sounds very refined and very international. You know, more so than a person used to hearing Americans speak all the time. So it's a different kind of a feel. Very cool.
I appreciate that. Thank you. That is a consequence of growing up in Nigeria and kind of going through a private school system that focused on the British curriculum, and so a lot of Nigerians ended up, even though they'd never been to London, again because we were colonized by the British. A decent amount of Nigerians sometimes speak with a British accent, but then in kind of my formative years when I went to the States, if I called the trunk of a car a boot, I would get called out. And so I was like, man, I need to drop that. I need to like start making some changes. If I called a glass of water some water, that was getting called out. Yeah. So over the years, like the edges just kind of get sanded down a little bit. But I think with all, again, that idea of code switching. If I'm in a Nigerian setting, if I'm with my family or something, like the Nigerianness kind of comes out a little bit more. It just natural. Kind of shifts and changes. Yeah,
it's natural to do that, at least for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, so this is a 6-issue. Coming back to Bronze Facius, it's a 6-issue series.
6 issues, yeah. And you know, like I said, I think we do have some plans for how we could possibly continue it, and it would feel natural and fun. And a part of me is like, I really do hope we get the chance to continue it, because I think it goes in unexpected places, and I think it goes to those places in a way that feels natural. But we'll see. You know, I'm really looking forward to the trade paperback as well, because I think the good thing about trade paperbacks is that all of that work that you put in on the 6 issues comes together. You get to see, you know, in issue 1, for instance, right at the back, there's a page with an illustration and a quote, and that is our idea for this. Is that with each issue you're going to get one of those illustrations, and if you put them all together, they will form the myth that I was talking about with Shango and Bonka, and you can kind of get that essence of the myth from it. And then the trade paperback, that's where that all comes together. And we had a really cool artist from Benin actually who worked on those. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So that in the center, that's Shango, and then on either side of him, that's Timian Bonka, and that's essentially kind of Shango telling Timian Bonka to both kind of go forth into the world and do great things, I guess. So
nice.
Yeah,
that's dope.
Oh, I had no idea it was based on an actual myth. That makes it even cooler.
Yeah, it's I forget the name of the myth. I think it's called something like Shango and his 2 generals, or Shango and his 2 friends. I know if you Google it, it comes up. Again, don't worry about spoilers if you want to read the myth, because we're not following it 100%. Yeah.
Wow. Oh, that's amazing.
I did go and read it. It was cool. I liked it.
You read the myth?
Yeah, I did. I went and read it.
I
know the spoiler.
Believe me, you don't. Not from the myth. Well, I don't know. Yeah.
Oh, well,
we'll see.
Well, part of the fun of it, though, is kind of deciding, knowing that this is the inspiration. I'm interested to see how you guys play that out in a much different setting, right? It's not, you can't really copy it because, they're not 2 generals, fighting war. It's not the same thing. So I'm really interested to see how you guys pull off the vibe of the myth in the setting that you put it in.
Thanks. Yeah. And again, I think a lot of that is going to come through in Alexandra's art, because one thing that he's really good at is balancing, the facial expressions, like conveying emotion and making it feel real, but also, as you'll see from time to time, when we hint at some of that mythology, some of his illustrations that I've seen that he's working on are just like really cool, very vibrant, and they get across this like sense of power and strength really well.
Nice. You say Shope is his first love is animation, and it really shows, especially in in New Masters. The flow of his characters and everything, the action scenes are just so dead on. You can tell that this guy knows how to make a figure correctly and all that. I see you've done work in video games as well. Not video games, in RPGs. Is that correct?
Video games, yeah. Video games specifically.
Okay, so I'm such an old guy. I don't know what it's different
Oh,
with
no.
video games.
Of all oh yes, yeah, video game, there's a lot of overlap, and this video game, the specific genre is a tactical RPG. You know, I honestly got into the video game business a little bit late, I would say, in life, just about 5 years ago, right when the pandemic started. I moved across. I was in the US at the time, and I moved from Atlanta all the way over to the West Coast to start a new job. Right when everything was locking down. I'm gonna tell you, that was an interesting period. But I've always loved video games. Shof and I grew up playing video games. He's made some video games in the past as well. But for me, it was a dream come true, and I was in a really great studio. We worked on a game called the Lamplighters League, and it was I'd been writing for quite a while at the time, and it was such an education, honestly, because I think the expectation of a lot of writers who work in television or who work in movies, or even books and comics, they think that, oh, like writing for video games, it's not that difficult. You just kind of switch it. You just switch a flip. You just flip a switch and that's it. But it is extremely difficult. You have to think non-linearly in a lot of terms, because you have to think about everything that the player could do, and what if the player does things out of order. You have to think about the kinds of things that satisfy a player. You have to communicate clearly to them and repeat that communication multiple times, because sometimes when you're playing a video game, I don't know if either of you are gamers at all, but like, you know, you're not really paying attention 100% of the time, right? Like, yeah, there you go, PS5. But you're not paying attention 100% of the time. You might get distracted. And if the video game doesn't remind you what you should be doing, you're like, well, I'm kind of bored of this game now, I'm just going to put it down. So it is surprisingly technical, but it's been a ton of fun. And I will say, like, I'm working on what I would say is a dream project right now. I can't talk about it, but I will say that when it hits, I think, and I hope, like, people who have read my stuff will say, yeah, that makes sense that he's working on that. So yeah.
Easer. I like that.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Now, I know you have a love of comics as well. You mentioned Image and even Disney when you were growing up. What comic influences were there for you? For comic book influence were there for you when you were growing up?
When I was growing up, you know, in Nigeria in the early '80s, you just couldn't get sequential runs, really. You'd get like an issue 2, an issue 10, then like an issue 3, and you know, so it was really difficult to truly follow any kind of storyline. And really, the books that we were getting were mostly Marvel and DC, and they were almost always in black and white. They were printed on black and white newsprint, which I actually kind of think was cooler in a sense, because it meant that you got the raw inks and coloring in the 80s and in the 80s specifically, and you know, it was often halftone, which I think that we have now developed an appreciation for, but at the time it was like, these colors aren't doing it, you know. They're not. It wasn't until about like the 90s and 2000s that coloring really started coming to its own, I think, with digital coloring, and now you can do pretty much anything. But back then, I like the black and white, and so it was mostly stuff like Batman and Superman, occasionally Suicide Squad, that kind of thing. I was always really into Conan the Barbarian. I love John Buscema's artwork. I loved his anatomy. I loved the urgency, the flow of his lines. You know, those are the comics that I think I grew up on. And there was also a huge influence of European comics, so stuff like Tintin, Asterix and Obelix, and I think that if you look at those comics, those European comics, the tone of them is mirrored a little bit in New Masters, where things can sometimes get not quite silly, but like a little bit of heightened humor or dry humor. And if you look at Bronze Faces, definitely in Alex's work, you can see that European influence. It isn't standard American cartooning. It's closer to the bande dessinée style of European art. So yeah, those kinds of comics I loved, and I used to draw so much. Like I would trace, and then learn how to draw the characters. And I thought I was going to be an artist. That's what I wanted to do. And when I talked about setting up my own version of Image earlier, that was what I wanted to do. I used to think about, okay, how can I get stuff printed? How can I make my own characters, my own Captain Nigeria, Captain Africa, whatever, and get these printed in this country that doesn't really support printing of comics? How can I distribute them? What can I do about that? And the difficulty is that Nigeria is not set up for entrepreneurs. You have to really hustle to make it happen. And there are people who are doing that now. I will say that on the continent, who are doing incredible, amazing work of being able to produce comics in really difficult environments. But when you have, first of all, it's difficult to get hardware. It's impossible to get constant electricity. Like those are the kinds of things that you're dealing with that make it so hard to make your dreams come true. But that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to learn how to draw. I wanted to start an Image Comics. I wanted to also learn 3D animation, and I wanted to start like a Walt Disney type studios. I wanted to learn video games. I wanted to do all of that. I just wanted to tell stories, and it took a long time. It took, when I left college, I wasn't able to get into the comic book industry or the video game industry. I ended up doing marketing for like 15 years, which was it was kind of soul sucking, honestly, for me. But but I did it, and then eventually I got the chance to move back to the U.S. because I'd had a green card I had a green card that the application process took so long. And then one day my mom called me when I was in the Philippines, and she was like, "Hey, your green card has come through. The application's come through. Do you want to come over here?" I was like, "Yes." So I came over to the U.S. and I worked at Home Depot for about a year, and I said, "Okay, I think I was about 38. No, how old was that? I don't remember how old I was. I was approaching a milestone birthday. I can't remember how old I was, but I was like, okay, if I don't have something tangible at this point, then I will have to give up my dream, and like I'm gonna have to continue at Home Depot and work my way up the ladder." That was it. That was like, these are the two options for me. I'm going to become the best manager that this Home Depot branch could possibly ever have. I mean, that's true. It's like if I do something, it has to be the absolute best. I'm going to be the best manager that this branch has ever had, or I will actually make my own comic. And that was when Shof and I we made Outcasts of Jupiter, and then we made New Masters. And New Masters was a consequence of Outcasts of Jupiter, because that was a Kickstarter that we did in the same universe, and people backed it. And what happens is, no one really wants to give you a chance, but if you prove that you can finish something and finish it at a certain level of quality, which, like, I hopefully anyone who has Outcasts of Jupiter will the Kickstarter product book will pick it up and say, this is a really well done book. It's like really high quality printing, all of the things around it. Like we made coins and T-shirts and all that stuff. Like we did not make a dime off that Kickstarter, because every single cent went back into, if you're backing our idea, you're getting the absolute best thing to hold and keep. And so people at Boom, people at Image, people at Dark Horse, they saw Outcasts of Jupiter and they got in touch with us, and they were like, "Hey," not Image actually. Image did not get in touch with us about Outcasts, but people at Boom and people at Dark Horse, they're like, "Hey, how would you like to do this with us, maybe?" And Shof and I were like, "Well, we would not own 100% of the IP if we went with Boom. Technically that's not true, but we wanted the sole ownership that Image offered. And so here's how, like, the hubris that we had at the time, having never been published with anything, we ended up not going with Boom or Dark Horse at the time. And that ended up kind of being a good thing, I think, because a while later, we were able to submit Outcasts of Jupiter to a competition that was called the Creators for Creators Grant. It's unfortunately no longer a thing, but this, if you win it, you get $30,000 to work on your comic, which, let me tell you, the Image deal is the best deal in comics for indies. But you are going to have to either spend a lot of money or work really hard to convince people. Because when you think about comic book production, it's not just the writing that I'm doing. It's not just the art that Shof's doing. There is book design, and that's expensive. There's coloring, which is a huge burden, and it wasn't something that we could put on Shof as well. He did about half of the colors, I think, and then we ended up getting some help in some of the later books. There's book design, there's lettering, there's a graphic design, all of that stuff that if you're going the Image route, Image doesn't really handle, because, and I think this is a 100% fair deal, because they're publishing, they will publish your book for you, but you kind of have to get everything else together. And on the Boom end of the spectrum, you do get that support of, like, a book designer who helps to design the book and do the graphics, and they will help wrangle cover artists. Because here's the thing, finding cover artists, like every single cover that you pay for, that every variant cover is expensive, right? But it is something that people want. People love variant covers, and generally speaking, the more variant covers you have, the more the stores are going to order for you, right? Because they know that people love them. And all of these things were like, well, okay. Long story short, we did get the Creators for Creators grant. We got $30,000 to make new masters, and I'm so glad that we were able to get that, because as soon as we got new masters done, again, if you have an Image book, people tend to look at it and they're like, oh, these people, they're serious. They can actually do a thing. And so we started getting offers for other. It opens doors, is what I'll say. Yeah.
Okay, so Image will publish your book, but you got to do everything else. You got to get it ready for publication and take care of all those steps that you just mentioned. Whereas the Boom and maybe Dark Horse and other publishers, they will handle many of those steps for you. But that comes at what cost? At what percentage of the ownership or of the profits, or I guess X amount of whatever it comes to? They make that deal. It's a fairly fair deal on both ends, I guess.
I think so. I haven't worked with Dark Horse, but I will say, having worked with Boom, I've always felt that, with Image, it is a situation of, like, you get the Image brand, which is such a strong statement, really. It is, the house that Spawn built, the house of the Walking Dead, the house of of Saga, things like that. It is such a strong brand. So you get that. You also get complete creative freedom, and then on the Boom side, you have support. It is more of a partnership, right? Like Boom is itself a strong brand. They have, like, they've done a ton of things that are really huge. Berserkers, gigantic. Something is killing the children. Lumberjanes. You get an editor at Boom, and an editor is a huge support for a creator, because you can bounce ideas off them. They will help keep schedules. They'll find artists and say, hey, do you want to work with this person? What do you think about this? They will, all of that stuff that sounds like a small amount of work, they take on, and they help you produce, and they give you marketing. They put out your book. They send it to reviewers. All of that stuff that you would otherwise have to do the legwork for on your own, Boom kind of takes care of. And so it depends on you as a creator. What do you want for this book? What do you feel you can do? And ultimately, it felt like Bronze Faces. This was something where we knew that if we went with Boom, we were going to be able to get, again, people like Alexandra Tefenkji to be a co-creator. We were going to be able to get Hassan Otsman Elhau to do the letters and Lee Luffridge to do the colors. And they were able to contact people like, Osaze Adamson, who does the myth plaques at the end. And they will give you an advance. They will help cover so much of that stuff financially. Where with Image, that's a lot. It's not entirely impossible, but it is a lot more difficult. So it's a give and take. I'm grateful for that we as creators have both options.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
Absolutely. And before we let you go, thank you so much for your time, Shobo. There's a question Jenny Meldrum has of what does the bank of characters mean? It's in the previous slide I showed before.
A bark. So a video game bark is it's one of those things where when you're actually playing the game and the character says something like reloading or taking cover or maybe they pull off a really cool shot and they say something like, got him right in the head or something like that. It serves two functions. One of them is it lets you as the player know what just happened or what is about to happen, just in case, again, you're not paying attention. But it also gives the character you're controlling personality because it lets you express how they say it. So in Lamplighters League, for instance, we had Eddie, who was a cowboy, and when he'd shoot like a bunch of people, he'd say something that sounded cowboy-esque, and it just reinforces character. So yeah, that's what barks are. They're the meat and potatoes of video game writing. They're a ton of fun.
Okay, yeah, it's just bark. Yeah, I guess if I played games, I probably would know that already. I suppose, huh? So you know that, Marcus?
No, I did not know that.
Okay. Oh, good. I feel a little better.
Technical term, yeah. Inside baseball a little bit.
Oh, okay. Baseball. Oh, now you're talking my talking my language now. Yes. All right. So, man, do you have any more questions, Marcus?
Well, I just want to say, if you guys are interested in this book, if you want to see more of this book, then we got to show Boom Studios that we are by pre-ordering. I've pre-ordered the series, so I'm locked in for it.
Yep.
I'll be buying it from my online shop and my local shop, so I'll be double buying it because I definitely want to see this thing through and see what you guys have for it. So if you guys liked it, get on your pre-order sites. Make sure you tell your local comic shop this is something you're trying to see.
Absolutely.
I'm pulling
it myself. I am definitely pulling it. Is this another think about
the Gunners. Yeah, that's my football team.
90 also loves Arsenal.
Yeah.
So
big game this weekend. Favorite Arsenal player. I love them all so much, but Bukayo Saka, you have to, that's a fellow Nigerian boy, so you have to really like that team. Honestly, I love them. I love them all. Big game this weekend, though. Don't let me down. Yes, our boy.
Go Arsenal.
90 is so excited right now. I'm telling you. He is so excited.
Oh, gosh.
Yes, our boy.
Nice.
Thank you.
Well, thanks so much for coming on, Shobo. I mean, this is been a great talk about all the stuff that you guys are doing and this wonderful book that was the penultimate book on the Wednesday stream. Check that out on every Wednesday if you get a chance. And we wish you well, and hopefully we'll have you back at some point to talk about this next thing you can't talk about right now, which is coming up that you're working on.
Yeah, just keep an eye on the gaming outlets. When it gets announced or re-announced, I think it's going to be a big deal. I think it's really cool, especially to this audience here. I will say that much. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to shout out because I really enjoyed it. Pink Riot on YouTube. They had another great interview over there. The whole team had an interview there. I enjoyed it, and it definitely got me more interested in the book. So if you guys enjoyed this and you're interested in more, definitely check that channel out and subscribe to them while you're over there because it's a great comic book channel.
For sure. All right. Well, thank you so much, Shobo, and thanks to everyone who jumped on the stream and everyone's watching on the replay. And wow, go out and check out Bronze Faces, and not to mention New Masters, which is just such a great book, such a great series that I'm just realizing is amazing. And what's the first Kickstarter that you had? I got to look for that as well. That's still available somewhere, or is there?
It isn't really. No, unfortunately not. It's called Outcasts of Jupiter. Sometimes they show up in conventions if we have a few extra copies. We usually just like give them out to people. So maybe at some point we'll be able to republish or something. Yeah.
Okay. I'll keep an eye out. Maybe on eBay or somewhere, someone might have a copy.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I don't see what eBay says about that.
You find everything on eBay.
Yeah.
All right, sir. Thank you so much for stopping by. Thanks for everyone else. Man, and we'll see you guys next time. Appreciate you all. Thanks, and have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Goodbye.
We love you, Denver! City by the Bay! John Denver!
Is a fire really necessary?
Ask them.